It just shows you that each team is on the edge and you have to get everything absolutely spot on in order to get the result you need. What was your strategy and approach to turn one? Perhaps a little bit of background on Mexico and why it's such a difficult turn one to get right, first of all. It's the fastest approach speed of any circuit on the calendar. So the speed that you enter into turn one is faster than anywhere else, faster than Monza, faster than Sochi even, which has a longer run down to turn one, but not the same straight line speed. And the drivers get one chance at it, one practice, effectively, as you go in off the race start. That's the first time they'll experience that, and they have one chance to get it right. They do laps to grid where they leave from the end of the pit lane and do a start and approach turn one, but you're on a different vector, a different speed, you're starting the right-hand side of the circuit, so it's not really the same thing. As a result of that, the drivers have a feeling of where they're going to be braking to get the optimum performance into turn one, to not lock up, to not go wide across the grass, and to get the car turned in. But ultimately, to a certain extent, it's a guess. It's an educated guess, but a guess all the same. The strategy and approach to turn one was quite straightforward here. For Valtteri, if he had a good start, he was going to let Lewis tow along behind him and make sure that he covered off that threat from Verstappen. The starts, as they turned out, was that Valtteri had a slightly worse start for both Verstappen and Lewis. It's not a lot, around about 4 meters or so, but it was sufficient that Lewis wasn't able to tuck up behind. More so, Verstappen's start being good meant he was alongside Valtteri very, very quickly. The result of that is they ended up 3 wide incredibly quickly and early on until that run down into turn one. And now it's just a question of braking. Now, Valtteri wasn't on the optimum line, nor was Lewis. The grip on the right-hand side of the circuit is slightly worse than where Verstappen was on that racing line. Even so, the differences in braking should have been a few meters, not perhaps the difference that you saw. Ultimately, the drivers braked where they thought they could. If you saw Verstappen's comments afterwards, it was quite clear that he was going in there guessing and hoping for the best, and it worked out for him. We ended up losing out there as a result of it, and more so as we went into it. As you saw other cars perhaps locking up, Ricciardo being one of them, contact happened and Valtteri got taken out and pushed to the back of the grid. What would the race have looked like if we'd held position off the line? I don't think you need me to tell you that Red Bull were incredibly fast in the race, faster than us. They had a much better car. Verstappen was able to pull away when he needed to from Lewis, and Perez was all over Lewis's gearbox all race. But had we kept position, we were first and second on the road, there's a little bit more you can do now as a team. For example, you can create a small gap between your 2 cars. You have to do that naturally for cooling reasons anyway, which just gives you a slightly higher probability of your lead car being successful, of not being undercut. So had we got away and we were first and second, I think there's a good chance that we would have been able to defend against the Red Bulls all race. Conversely, if we were first but we had Red Bulls topped up behind us in second and third, I think it would have been awfully difficult to hold on to the race lead. They could have stopped one car early, one car late, and ultimately we would have been in compromise with those 2 cars. Where we finished up P2 with Lewis was really correct based on performance order, sadly, after the start had happened. And I'm happy we held on to it. It was a defensive strategy we employed all race. Now, of course, in Valtteri's case, really he walked away with far less than he deserved. Had he not been hit in turn one, we really should have walked away with 4th at worst and 3rd more realistically. Did Valtteri pick up any damage after that turn one instance? No, nothing of substance. We stopped Valtteri only under that first safety car simply because we wanted to try and either take the hard to the end of the race, but certainly it was a good opportunity to rotate through your tyres to give yourself a strategic advantage. And we knew that Ricciardo coming in would have to change the front wing, so we should hold on to that track position. But the car was fine aerodynamically. Could Valtteri have made it to the end of the race on the hard tyres he was on? The answer to that one is probably. It's always very difficult to know, but based on when the tyres come in, what we do is we scrape the tyre, we clear off the rubber and then measure them. There's wear holes across the tyres, which you may have seen on TV, and allows us to understand how much we've taken out of the tyre already and therefore forecast what we could have done by the end of the race. I think the end of the race would have been awfully difficult for him, but I think he would have achieved it on one set of tyres. However, what we had really seen is that there is degradation and there is drop-off. You saw that in the case of Lewis against Perez, for example, end of race. That was very, very difficult. And the 2-stop for Valtteri would have put him ahead of Ricciardo if the pit stop had gone well, and that would have given him the best opportunity to score points. Without that, Norris was just ahead of Valtteri in the pit window. So in other words, when Norris stopped, he would have come out ahead of Valtteri. And that would have meant that P11 is pretty much where we would have cemented ourselves. We wouldn't have had the tyres to be able to overtake McLaren. The only way you're going to be able to get the overtake delta, the difference in performance, was to stop, convert that two-stop. Was the two-stop ever a consideration for Lewis, given where he was with Perez and Max ahead of him? The answer is straightforward on that one, it's no. Overtaking in Mexico is very, very difficult, but more importantly, the degradation on the tyre is very, very low. And the Red Bulls had hardly any. You saw at the end of the race, hopefully, that they were setting fastest laps, purple laps as we would call them, just an indication really of how little degradation there was on their tyres. Now, in the case of Perez and Verstappen, a little bit fresher than our own, but even so, in order to have a two-stop work, you need someone else to really fall off that one-stop tyre curve, to be in trouble on tyres at the end of the race. You saw how difficult overtaking was. Perez, despite the pace difference, was unable to overtake Lewis. And furthermore, once you get close, your brakes and your power units start to become very, very hot. So unless you get the overtake done in a lap or two, you really have to drop back and start again. So as a result of that, if we had stopped Lewis, it's not that we would have been fighting for the win, it's more we would have cemented him into third place. What happened at Valtteri's pit stop? It's a good question, and even as I talk to you now, we don't have all of the answers. What I can tell you is the wheel looked as though it was stuck on the axle. When the car came in, the carman did everything correctly and undid the nuts from the axle, as did all corners. But when they tried to remove the wheel wouldn't come off the axle anymore. They put the gun back on and gun the nut on and back off again. It's a standard procedure to try and overcome some of the problems. And even when they did that, the wheel still wouldn't come loose. The gunman then put his hand into the wheel and effectively brute forced it loose off the axle and burnt himself slightly in doing so. It was a brave action by him. That was obviously costly in time, but more importantly, we need to understand why that wheel wasn't able to come loose initially. There's some theories. Potentially we had a little bit of debris and build up inside what we call the cate, the carbon area that sits inside the wheel. But as I said, as we talk to you now, we don't understand that, and it's an investigation that will carry through for the next few days. Why was Valtteri unable to overtake Ricciardo despite the straight line speed and performance difference? If we wind back a little bit, we were actually ahead of Ricciardo on those opening laps. After the pit stop, he had to change his front wing, and we came out ahead of him and behind Stroll. Stroll, whilst defending to Valtteri, actually went off the track and came back on, and as a result of it, pushed Valtteri wide, allowing Ricciardo through. And that really cemented Valtteri's race from then onwards. He was stuck behind Ricciardo and unable to get through. So the question is why? Performance-wise, we had over a second and a half. We had a little bit of straight line speed difference, but straight line speed is only one factor in overtaking. You still have to be close enough on the exit of the corner in order to make that work with the DRS open. And that was the problem. Ricciardo was very, very strong through the last turn and was able to pull just a small amount, around about 0.6, but you can't make that back even with DRS open in the straight line. For overtaking to really happen, you need a tyre differential as well, something that under braking Ricciardo perhaps would struggle, or he would struggle out of traction at the last corner. But of course, we're on the same age tyres near enough all race. When we converted to that two-stop, we were forecast to come out ahead of Ricciardo, and this wouldn't have been a problem anymore. But of course, that didn't happen, and Valtteri ended up again back behind him on the same age tyres. And ultimately, you're not going to generate the overtake delta to do that. It was right on the edge. Speaking to Valtteri after the race, just a tenth or maybe 2 more performance in his favour would have done the job. But it was just not enough to make it stick. How was Lewis able to defend against Perez at the end of the race and hold on to that P2 position? Overtaking in Mexico is a lot more difficult than perhaps it would seem when you look at a track map. It's not Monaco, of course, but the fact that we're 2,200 meters means that the density, the air density is a lot lower. And as a result of that, your brakes, your tires, your power unit become a lot warmer when stuck in traffic. And it's difficult. You have to open the car right up in order to get some cooling through it. The result of that is what you would have seen with Perez is he came close and then had to back off for a few laps, cool the car down, cool the tires down, cool the brakes down, and try again. So that's the first point. It's very difficult for lap after lap to sit behind a competitor, even if you're much, much faster than them. The second is that whilst there's an overtaking point, which is the run down into turn 1, a little bit into turn 4, but really primarily into turn 1, as Valtteri had on Ricciardo, as long as you have a good exit out of last corner, you're just about able to hold on to that position. And furthermore, we had good straight line speed, especially on that run down into turn 1, at probably around about 5 to 6 kilometers an hour over them. Now, Perez would have had DRS open. Even so, that's enough for us to just hold on to that position. Had Lewis's tyres dropped off the tyre curve and he'd lost grip under braking or on traction, that would have been a different matter. But fortunately, they were just in a good enough state to hold on and defend the end of race. Is there a reason why the team didn't run the medium tyres until the race? Yes. Ultimately, we were trying to save what we thought would be the best tyre as an additional tyre set for the race. Use it when it perhaps mattered more than in free practice. It meant we had a little bit of a hole in our knowledge. We didn't fully understand how those medium tyres were going to perhaps perform, be it on a single lap, qualifying was the first time that we tried them, or on a long run. But we did have experience on both the soft and on the hard tyre. And you can really, between those two, interpret what the medium was going to do. If you looked at the converse, Red Bull had no experience in the hard tyre, the tyre that they spent most of the race on. So there's always a trade-off and a balance. You can't have both unless you split your cars, which also has other impacts on the race weekend. What we had really reviewed is in 2019, the degradation on Friday was very, very high. If you had raced on Friday in 2019, you would have been 3-stopping. But on Sunday in 2019, it was a 1-stop and an easy 1-stop. The result of that then, that we wanted to really evaluate how the soft tyre performance was in FP1, so we ran 2 softs, see how it worked on high fuel. And if it was performing well, we already interpreted that the medium would probably be the most useful extra tyre set. And as a result of that, and when the degradation was soft in FP1, we then kept that extra medium for the race weekend. Reviewing the race now and the whole weekend, that was the correct decision. The medium was actually the fastest race tyre. It would have been more useful at a safety car. We didn't have one, but it was there ready to go. Or if the 4 of us had all got away and one of us was 4th, it allows you to convert to that 2-stop and try it. It may not have worked, but it's the right tyre for doing that. Furthermore, that additional medium tyre means that you can definitely run twice in Q2. Mexico has what we call very high track evolution. So if you look from right at the beginning of the weekend all the way through to qualifying, we're over 5 seconds faster. There was a little bit of an oil spill in FP3, which may not have come across on TV, which reset the track a little bit, but that's not what the track evolution comes from. It's just the track clearing up from the amount of dust and rubber going down. That extra medium tyre in Q2 could have been invaluable because the track evolution is still high in qualifying and your first run may not have put you safe enough. Now, Lewis's lap was actually quite competitive, but we ran again irrespective because we had that extra medium tyre. The other benefit of the additional medium was that we could do laps to grid on that tyre before the race started and practice starts on it as well. So it just gives you a little bit more information that's relevant to the race than had we run that medium on Friday. What are the positives that the team can take away from this weekend? There's plenty. This championship, and trust us, we've been in the lead of it sufficiently with a points gap. It's never over until it's over. One DNF, both for ourselves or from Red Bull, will completely change how this championship forms at the end of the season. And ultimately, the points gap is tiny. We've got 4 races to go, 19 points in the drivers and 1 point in the constructors in our favour. That's nothing. It's a reset condition. We've out-qualified Red Bull at a track where they were stronger. It just shows you that each team is on the edge and you have to get everything absolutely spot on in order to get the result you need. And there's plenty of opportunity. The result of that is that the positives we can take out of it are that across the last few races, even at tracks that perhaps don't suit us as much, we've been there or thereabouts. We've walked away with a second with Lewis. We walked away out of qualifying 1st and 2nd. That just means we're in this fight right to the end, and I'm sure we will be until Abu Dhabi, until that checkered flag. The positives are that the team, despite this punishing triple header, are pulling together closer than I've ever seen it before. The drivers are working together more than I've seen before as well. It's a bonded team, a team that's here to do one goal, which is to win both championships. And that for me is the positives. What was your strategy and approach to turn 1? Perhaps it's a little bit useful to give some context here as to Mexico. Thank you again for all of your questions, and we look forward to answering them again after the Brazilian Grand Prix next week.